If you clicked on this, I already know something about you that the people closest to you have never been able to see. You have spent years making yourself smaller, not because you wanted to, because somewhere along the way, you learned that your fullness made other people uncomfortable. So you turned the volume down. You learned to apologize before you even spoke. You learned to shrink your light so that nobody in the room would have to squint. And God watched you do it. Year after year. He watched you fold yourself into a shape that was never yours. He watched you walk into rooms carrying a fire, and then spend the whole time pretending it wasn't there. Because the people in the room had never seen fire and didn't know whether to warm themselves by it or run from it. So you put it out, or you tried to. You can't actually put out the fire God lit in you, but you can sit on it until it almost kills you. And that's what you've been doing. You learn to read the room before you read yourself. You learn to ask, what do they need me to be, before you ever asked, who did God make me? And one became a habit, and the habit became a personality, and the personality became a prison you stopped noticing because you'd been living in it so long. And this morning, this exact morning that you woke up and somehow ended up here, He is saying something to you that He needs you to hear before you do anything else today, before you check your phone again, before you answer that message, before you walk into that job, that kitchen, that conversation, where you always become less than who you are. He said this should be your first task today. Stop shrinking yourself for other people, and do it quickly. Because the clock on this is not infinite, and I'm going to tell you why before we're done. Let me talk to you like you're sitting across the table from me, because that's the only way I know how to talk about something this important. Coffee getting cold between us. No pretending. Just you and me and the truth. Here's what most people never understand about the chosen ones. They think being chosen means being loud, being obvious, standing on a mountain with your arms raised while lightning cracks behind you. That's the picture they sell. That's the picture that's wrong. The chosen ones are almost always the ones who learn to hide, because the gift was so big, so early, that the world around them didn't know what to do with it. A child who felt too much, a teenager who saw through the lies the adults were telling, a grown man or woman who walks into a room and instantly knows who's hurting and who's pretending and carries the weight of all of it home with them at night. If that's you, you didn't learn to shrink because you were weak. You learned to shrink because you were powerful in a place that punished power. And there's a difference. There's a world of difference. And today we're going to deal with it. Think about Joseph for a second. Really think about him. Not the Sunday school cartoon version. A boy, 17 years old, and God gives him a dream so big it embarrasses everyone around him. He sees his own brothers bowing. He sees the sun and the moon and the stars bending toward him. And what does he do? He says it out loud. He doesn't shrink it. He doesn't soften it to make it easier for his brothers to swallow. And you know what happened. They threw him in a pit. They sold him like cattle. They took the coat off his back, the one thing that said you are favored, and they dipped it in blood and told his father he was dead. Now here's the part nobody talks about. After all that, Joseph could have learned the lesson the world wanted to teach him. The lesson was simple. Your dreams are dangerous. Make yourself smaller. Stop seeing what you see. Stop being who you are. And maybe people will stop hurting you. But he didn't learn that lesson. In Potiphar's house, he showed up fully. In prison, he showed up fully. He interpreted dreams for other prisoners when he had every reason to be bitter and closed off and quiet. He kept being the fullness of who God made him, in the worst rooms a man can find himself in. And that is why he was standing in front of Pharaoh when the moment came. Not because he shrank, because he refused to. You hear me? The thing you've been told to hide is the exact thing God is going to use to put you in the room you were born for. So let me ask you something, and I want you to actually sit with it, not rush past it. When did you start shrinking? Was there a moment, a person, a voice that told you directly, or just with a look that you were too much? Too loud, too sensitive, too intense, too spiritual? too honest, too you. Because for most of you, there was a moment. And you've been organizing your whole life around that moment ever since. Making sure it never happens again. Making sure nobody ever has a reason to pull away from you. And in doing that, you've been slowly disappearing. God is saying, enough. Here's where it gets real. Shrinking doesn't actually protect you. That's the lie at the center of all of it. You think if you make yourself smaller, you'll be safer. You'll be more loved. People won't leave. But that's not what happens. What happens is you train people to relate to a version of you that isn't even real. And then you sit there, year after year, feeling unseen and unknown, and you don't realize you're the one who hid yourself. You can't be loved in a costume. You can only be tolerated in a costume. Love requires you to take it off. And I know that's terrifying. Because the costume is the only thing that's kept the peace. Take it off, and some people are going to leave. I'm not going to lie to you about that. Some relationships were only ever built on the smaller version of you. The version that didn't challenge anyone. The version that always said yes. The version that absorbed everyone else's discomfort so they never had to feel it. When you stand up to your full height, some of those people will not be able to stay. And that's going to hurt. But hear me, it's not a punishment. It's a purification. God is not taking those people from you to leave you alone. He's clearing the room so the ones who belong in your future can actually find you. Let me show you Moses. Because Moses is the patron saint of every person who ever felt like they weren't enough to do the big thing. God comes to him in a burning bush, calls him by name, tells him, I've heard my people crying, and I'm sending you. You, go stand in front of the most powerful man on earth and tell him to let my people go. And what does Moses do? He shrinks. Immediately. Who am I? He says. Who am I that I should go? And when God answers that, he shrinks again. They won't believe me. And again. I'm not eloquent. I've never been good with words. I'm slow of speech and slow of tongue. He is standing in front of a fire that doesn't burn out, hearing the literal voice of God, and he is still trying to talk God out of using him. Still trying to make himself smaller than the calling. Because that's what we do. We meet the size of what God is asking, and instead of rising to meet it, we list every reason we're not big enough. And here's what I love about this. God doesn't say, you're right, Moses, you're not enough. Let me find someone better. He says, I will be with your mouth. I will teach you what to say. The qualification was never going to come from Moses. It was going to come from the one who sent him. Your job was never to be enough on your own. Your job was to stop shrinking long enough to let God be enough through you. How many things have you talked yourself out of? How many times has God put something in front of you, a calling, a conversation, a step, a leap, and you stood in front of your own burning bush and started listing reasons? I'm not ready. I'm not qualified. People will judge me. Who am I to think I could do that? Who are you? You're the one he called by name. That's who you are. That settles it. Now I want to say something to you directly, because we're a few minutes in, and I need you to know who's talking to you. My name is George, and I'm not here as some distant voice reading words off a page. I've lived this. I spent years of my own life making myself small for rooms that were never going to hold me anyway. I know what it is to feel the calling and run from it. I know what it is to wake up at 3 in the morning with something burning in your chest that you can't explain to anyone around you, because they'd look at you like you'd lost your mind. And I know what it is to finally stop, to finally stand up. And I know what it costs, and I know what it pays. There are messages that pass through your eyes, and there are messages that pass through your spirit. If something in you recognized itself while watching, don't dismiss it. That is the Spirit confirming what was already written. The secret protocol carries 7 keys that unveil what heaven deposited in you before you ever arrived. Things no one around you has ever been able to name. It comes with the full audiobook for your moments of prayer, silence, and encounter with God. And you also receive the Awakening Map, the guide that illuminates the 5 seasons of spiritual awakening, revealing with precision exactly where you are and what comes next. The link is pinned in the first comment, but only for a limited time. Don't let this moment pass without a response. I'm telling you about it now, in the middle of this, not at the end. Because if I waited until the end, some of you would already be gone back to shrinking, back to the costume, back to the small life. And I don't want you to miss it, because the people who shrink are usually the same people who hesitate. They wait, they tell themselves later, and later never comes. But let's keep going, because I haven't told you yet why God said do it quickly. Think about David, the youngest, the forgotten one. When the prophet Samuel came to anoint a king from among Jesse's sons, David wasn't even invited to the lineup. His own father didn't think to call him in from the field. He was out there with the sheep, the smallest, the least, the one nobody counted. Samuel goes down the line, son after son, tall ones, strong ones, impressive ones. And God says no, 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 not this one, not that one. And finally Samuel asks, are these all your sons? And Jesse says, well, there's the youngest, but he's out with the sheep. As if he didn't even merit the interruption. They had to send for him. They had to go get the one who'd been left out of his own family's most important day. And the second he walks in, God says, that's him. Rise and anoint him. That's the one. Now imagine if David had spent that whole moment shrinking. Imagine if when they finally called him in from the field, he ducked his head, mumbled an excuse, said, you've got the wrong guy. I'm just the kid with the sheep. Imagine if he'd been so trained by being overlooked that he overlooked himself. But he didn't. He stood there, and he let himself be anointed. He let oil run down his head in front of the family that had forgotten him. He received the fullness of who God said he was, even though every single person in that room had been treating him as less. That's your task today. Not to convince everyone who overlooked you. Not to prove it to the people who never called you in from the field. Just to stand there when God calls your name and not duck. Here's why it has to be quick. Here's the urgency. Every day you spend shrinking is a day someone who needs the full version of you goes without it. Think about that. You're not the only one affected by your hiding. There are people assigned to your life, people God meant to reach through you, who can't be reached by the costume. They need the real one. They need the full one. And every day you stay small, they stay lost a little longer. David's full size wasn't for David. It was for a nation pinned down in fear, because a giant was screaming at them every morning, and every grown soldier in that army had decided to shrink. 40 days. 40 days they let Goliath taunt them, and 40 days they made themselves smaller, and the whole nation was held hostage by the collective hiding of men who should have stood up. And then a teenager who refused to shrink walked down into the valley with a sling and 5 stones. And the thing that had paralyzed an entire army fell in about the time it takes to throw a rock. Your fullness is somebody else's freedom. Do you understand that? The thing you keep hiding is the exact thing somebody out there is desperate for. Your hiding isn't humility. It's withholding. You've dressed up disobedience as politeness for so long you forgot it was ever a choice. That's hard. I know that's hard. But I'd be lying to you if I softened it. And George doesn't soften the truth to keep you comfortable. I love you too much for that. Let me show you one more. Esther. Because Esther's story is the whole point of everything I'm trying to say to you. A girl, an orphan, taken into a palace she never asked to enter. And through a series of events nobody planned, she ends up as queen. But here's the thing she's hiding. She's been told to hide. Her cousin Mordecai told her not to reveal where she came from, who her people were. So she's living inside the palace as a smaller, safer, edited version of herself. Queen on the outside, hidden on the inside. And then the moment comes. Her entire people are about to be destroyed. And there's only one person positioned to do anything about it. Her, the hidden one, the one who's been shrinking inside a palace. And Mordecai sends her a message that I want you to receive as if it were sent directly to you this morning. He says, Don't think you'll escape just because you're in the palace. If you stay silent now, deliverance will come from somewhere else, but you and your house will perish. And then, the line. The line that should be tattooed on the heart of every person watching this. Who knows but that you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this? For such a time as this. Everything you went through. Every room you got overlooked in. Every time you were too much, and then learned to be too little. Every season of hiding. It positioned you. It placed you. It put you exactly where you needed to be, so that when the moment came, you'd be standing in the right room. But Esther still had to choose. The positioning didn't save anyone. The choice did. She had to stop hiding. She had to walk into the throne room uninvited, which by law could have cost her life, and she had to say, "This is who I am, and these are my people, and I will not shrink while they die. If I perish," she said, "I perish, but I'm going." That's the energy God is calling out of you today. Not recklessness. Resolve. The decision that the version of you who hides is more dangerous than the version of you who stands up. Because the hidden you protects nothing. The hidden you just delays the destiny while the world waits. Now I want to take you somewhere darker for a minute. Because not all shrinking looks like fear. Some of it looks like exhaustion. And if that's where you are this morning, not scared, just worn all the way down, then I need you to meet Elijah under a tree in the wilderness. Because here was a man who did not shrink. He stood on a mountain, alone, against 450 prophets of a false god. And he called down fire from heaven in front of an entire nation. He was the biggest version of himself anyone had ever seen. The fire fell. The people fell on their faces. It was the greatest day of his life. And then a single woman, a queen named Jezebel, sent him a message threatening his life. And this man who'd just faced down 450 without blinking, ran. He ran into the wilderness, sat down under a broom tree, and asked God to let him die. "I've had enough, Lord," he said. "Take my life. I'm no better than my ancestors." Look at how fast it happened. From the mountaintop to the death wish in the space of a day. And I'm telling you this because some of you are going to do the big brave thing. You're going to stop shrinking. You're going to stand up. And then the very next day, the fear is going to come roaring back, and you're going to want to crawl under your own broom tree and disappear all over again. And I need you to know what God did with Elijah, because it's the most tender thing in all of Scripture. He didn't lecture him. He didn't shame him for being afraid after being so brave. He sent an angel who touched him and said, "Get up and eat." And there was bread, and there was water. And Elijah ate and slept. And the angel came back a second time and fed him again, because the journey ahead was too much for him in the state he was in. God didn't need Elijah to perform his way back to courage. He just needed him to eat and rest and let himself be carried for a little while. And then, when Elijah was ready, God didn't show up in the wind or the earthquake or the fire. He showed up in a still, small voice, a whisper. So if your shrinking comes from being tired, bone-tired, soul-tired, tired of carrying everything for everyone, then your first task today might just be to let God feed you. To stop performing strength and let yourself be held. The standing up comes. But sometimes the bravest thing a worn-out chosen one can do is eat the bread, drink the water, and trust that the whisper is coming. You don't have to call down fire today. You just have to refuse to die under the tree. And then there's Peter. Because some of you don't shrink out of fear or exhaustion, you shrink out of shame. You did the thing you swore you'd never do. You denied who you were. You folded under pressure, and you've been smaller ever since. Because a voice keeps telling you that you forfeited your right to be the full version of yourself. Peter knows that voice. This is the man who walked on water, who swore he'd die before he'd ever deny his Lord. And then, on the worst night of his life, a servant girl pointed at him by a fire and said, "You were with him, weren't you?" And Peter, bold, loud, walked on water. Peter shrank. "I don't know him," he said, 3 times. And then the rooster crowed, and he went out and wept like his heart had broken in half. That's the kind of failure that makes a man hide for the rest of his life. That's the kind of moment that teaches you to never stand tall again. Because look what happened the last time you thought you were somebody. But the story doesn't end at the fire. After the resurrection, Jesus finds Peter back fishing, back to the small life, back to who he was before any of it. And he doesn't shame him. He makes him breakfast. And then, 3 times, once for each denial, he asks, "Do you love me?" And 3 times Peter says yes. And 3 times Jesus hands him back his calling. Feed my sheep, tend my lambs. He didn't disqualify the one who shrank. He restored him. He took the worst moment of Peter's life and turned it into the doorway back into the biggest version of himself. And that same Peter, the one who hid by a fire, stood up not long after in front of thousands and preached without flinching. And 3,000 souls came in a single day. So if shame is the thing that's been keeping you small, hear me. Your failure didn't cancel your calling. It just gave God a more powerful story to tell through you. The denial wasn't the end. It was the setup for the restoration. Stop letting the worst thing you ever did decide how big you're allowed to be. So let me bring this all the way home, right to your kitchen table where we started. When you get up from this, and you will, in a few minutes, you'll go back to your day. There's going to be a moment, probably soon, maybe within the hour, where the old pattern shows up. Somebody's going to need something from you that requires you to disappear a little. Someone's going to say something, or imply something, or just look at you a certain way, and your whole body is going to want to do what it's always done. Fold. Apologize. Shrink. Make yourself convenient. And in that moment, I need you to remember this conversation. I need you to remember that God said, this should be your first task today, not someday, not when you feel ready. Today, the first task. Stop shrinking yourself for other people. You don't have to announce it to anyone. You don't have to make a speech. You just have to refuse, one time, to disappear. Stand up to your full height in one small moment, and let the discomfort be theirs for once, instead of always yours. Because here's the truth that Joseph learned in the pit, that Moses learned at the bush, that David learned in the field, that Esther learned in the palace. The fullness of who you are was never a problem to be managed. It was always a gift to be delivered, and the only person who can stop the delivery is you. The world has had enough of your small. Heaven is waiting on your full. And I really believe that the reason you ended up here this morning, out of everything you could have been doing, is that some part of you is already done hiding. You're tired of the costume. You feel it. The seams are splitting anyway. The real you is pressing against the edges of the life you built to contain it. Let it out, quickly, before the day talks you back into the small. Now I want to hear from you, and I want you to be specific, because generic doesn't move anything. I don't want an amen and a scroll. I want you to do something braver than that. In the comments, I want you to tell me the exact moment you started shrinking. The one, the person, the room, the words, the look. Name it. Because the thing you can name loses its power over you, and the thing you keep hidden keeps running your life from the shadows. And then this is the part that matters. Tell me the one place in your life, this week, where you're going to stop. The one room, the one relationship, the one conversation where you're done disappearing. Say it out loud in the comments, where I can read it, where heaven can witness it, where it stops being a feeling and becomes a decision. Name where you shrank. Name where you'll rise. I'll be reading, and I'll be standing with you.